So I'm just giving you, by the way, characteristics of these folks, okay? And the other thing that I should tell you is just because, like, some of this stuff you're going to say, ooh, I kind of have that, you know, but it doesn't mean you have a personality disorder, okay? Keep in mind that the folks that have these things, first of all, have most all of these symptoms, not all, but mostly all of them, okay, a lot of them. And it interferes with their function, right? What you're going to hear here is things that sort of strike a chord with you, and you're going to say, well, I do have some of that. But that doesn't mean it's a disorder. It just means that you have traits of these things. And all of us do, by the way. It's what makes us unique. And also, the other thing to keep in mind is, with these disorders, it's a little bit rare to see somebody who has just histrionic personality disorder or just antisocial personality disorder. They tend to, folks, all of us tend to have different pieces to our personality. A little like a puzzle kind of, you know, little pieces here. Now, with these disorders, these are folks that most of the puzzle fits these things. Okay? And a lot of these folks will have one or two different kinds of personality disorders. So, you know, you, again, don't get worked up if you have some of these things, because we all do. So back to histrionic personality disorder. We talked about lively, flirtatious, has to be life of the party, like Blanche. The need for attention is so strong, sometimes they'll make up stories so that they can be, they can draw attention to themselves and get attention of some type. They may act sexually provocative or seductive, not only with their partner, but also in social situations where it's not necessarily appropriate, right? They don't have very good boundaries with like when they first meet somebody, they're my best friend in the world kind of thing. They describe them as, you know, they're super close when they just met them. You know, and the rest of us would say, well, you know, how can you be that close? You know, you can't be best friends. You just met each other. The emotional expression, it changes quickly, and as I mentioned, it's kind of exaggerated, but it's shallow. And so it's dramatic, but it's shallow. There's not a lot behind it. So just like what I was saying, you know, best friends in the world. Well, what does that mean? You just said hi to her. That's all it means. They consistently use their physical appearance to draw attention to themselves. So these are folks who might, just give you some examples, but maybe dress real flamboyantly. They have lots of makeup or lots of jewelry, maybe dress all in black. That doesn't necessarily have to be, but maybe bright colors is another thing, you know. They may spend a lot of time on grooming and on clothes and things like that. A lot of time and money on those things. May fish for compliments regarding their appearance. You know, like, I don't know if Blanche did that, but, you know, oh, honey, how do you like this dress? You know, kind of thing, you know, just fishing for compliments. They have real strong opinions about stuff, but then when you actually start getting into it, there's not a lot behind that. So it's a little bit, you know, there's nothing really to back it up. They have strong opinions and they act real emotional about a certain topic, but then when you get down to it, there are arguments for why they feel so emotional about that. There isn't as much there. It's kind of shallow. They can be fairly suggestible and overly trusting. And again, that's my best friend. I just met her. Well, that's trusting a little bit too much maybe in the beginning. And they tend to be at a little higher risk of suicide gestures for attention mainly, not because necessarily they want to die, but it's to draw attention to themselves. So that everybody's ignoring me, then if you say that you want to die, or you act like you're going to hurt yourself, scratch yourself, things like that, that will bring attention to you. Believe it or not, it's actually probably equal in men and women, but because our culture is the way it is, it's probably much more diagnosed in women. Just the way our society is, I think. There can be a lot of things that go with it. There are things, you may have heard of somatization disorder. It's basically where somebody has an unconscious need to play the role of the patient, and probably because of the attention that they get and everything. And so there's a higher incidence of this with this personality disorder, and also other of these cluster B personality disorders like the borderline and the antisocial stuff. These things can fall together as well. Okay, does anybody have any questions about histrionic personality disorder? Because the next one is antisocial personality disorder. No questions? Okay, do you guys remember the show Dallas? Do you remember that? Remember J.R. Ewing? Picture him in your head? And for those of you who are younger out there, and I've seen this show once, but I can't for the life of me think who this character is. But there's a show called Lost. Does anybody know Lost? It's that show where they're all stranded on this island, and there's some monster, a dinosaur or something, chasing them all around. Anybody heard of this show, Lost? There's a character named Sawyer. Is that a man or a woman? Does anybody know? It's a man. According to Vicky, anyway, he seems like he's antisocial. I can't tell you because I don't know who that character is. But J.R. Ewing I know, and he certainly seemed antisocial. So most of you, it sounds like know who J.R. Ewing is. Antisocial personality disorder it's kind of a pattern of violation of and disregard for the rights of other people. Okay. It usually begins in childhood and continues on to adulthood. So these folks really trample on the rights of other people all the time. And really don't really have much remorse for that. They don't have much of a conscience, and that's kind of what defines this disorder. So these are folks who don't have much empathy for the common man or woman. I mean, and we'll go into some of the other things that happen here, but it's also it can be referred to as psychopathy or a psychopath or sociopathy or a sociopath. These folks repeatedly break the law, and they do that in a whole lot of ways. They harass other people, steal, they do illegal things, property destruction. They don't really care much about feelings or wishes or rights of other people. They're kind of dishonest and manipulative in relationships, and they'll sort of they'll kind of con people, and they'll use sex, or they'll try to gain profit from somebody else's demise, not necessarily death, but from somebody else's expense, right? So they'll do anything to get sex or to get money or power in some way. They might use aliases. They may not use a real name. They may say that they're somebody else, pretend that they're somebody else. They also tend to be impulsive and don't plan ahead much. So again, they don't think much about the consequences of what might happen, either to them or to someone else if they act in a certain way. Does any of this sound like J.R. Ewing? Some of it? Yeah. They tend to be irritable and aggressive, get into a lot of fights, they physically assault other people. That can be their spouse, that can be anybody they run into, it can be their kids, and they don't really tend to be very good caregivers. So if they have kids, they're not real good at that, and if they're taking care of an elderly adult or something like that, they're not very good at that either. The impulsivity and their recklessness gets them in trouble with, they'll drive drunk, they'll speed over and over again. By the way, speeding in and of itself is not antisocial personality disorder, I must admit. Right? I got to be careful here. I mean, the policeman might see me on TV. They tend to have multiple accidents because they're kind of impulsive. They're irresponsible with work and finances. They tend to get into a lot of debt. And as I mentioned, they don't have much of a conscience. These folks, in the older days, the jails had a lot of these folks in them. These are folks that broke the law, right? So they end up in jail. And these days, it's a little harder to tell. A lot of folks now, they're in jail. It's kind of sad, but a lot of folks have, either some type of mental illness, brain illness, where they committed some crime while they were sick and nobody ever picked up on the fact that they had a brain illness, so they end up going into the jail. We're closing down all the state hospitals, you see, where you would really treat somebody that had one of these illnesses, and so they're ending up in the jails, which is not really a very good idea, I don't think. But the other thing is substance abuse. Folks, this day and age, folks with substance abuse, they're all ending up in jail. What do you do, right? You send them in jail. Now, right or wrong, I don't know. Who am I to judge? But these are folks that probably deserve to have some treatment if they can. And in some cases, it may actually be okay because, at least in my opinion, some of these folks would probably die. They would use substances until they died. Well, maybe putting them in jail at least gets them out of that environment for a while, and maybe they can get a good fresh start coming out of there. I don't know. Folks with antisocial personality disorder, they'll say things like, they'll sort of take advantage of other people, and they'll say things like, losers deserve to lose, or life's unfair, So again, they don't care much about other people and how they feel or what might happen to them. To make this diagnosis in an adult, they tend to have had something called conduct disorder in kids.